The whispering wind. Eyes closed, everyone, Amelia murmured, her voice a comforting balm within the small, timbered schoolhouse. 10 pairs of eyelids fluttered down, some obediently, others with reluctance. Now tell me of the scents you detect. A soft chorus of sniffs rippled through the room. Smokewood, Miss Amelia, chirped Thomas, a 7-year-old ablaze with freckles. And? Amelia coaxed, her head canting slightly. The faintest shift caught a beam of sunlight, igniting the silver interwoven within her raven braid. Apples. Lily's voice, a bright bell, announced. From Mrs. Gable's baking. Amelia's smile bloomed. Excellent. Now listen closely. The children hushed, faces etched with concentration. Initially, only the aged building's gentle groans and a faraway crow's call broke the silence. Then a delicate rustling joined the symphony. Leaves, whispered Samuel, his tone reverent. At 12 he was her oldest pupil, a boy known for his quiet perception. Indeed, Amelia affirmed. The leaves are signaling the season's shift. Sense it? She reached out, her fingers brushing the rough-hewn sill. A subtle chill radiated from the glass, a sharp contrast to the sun's embrace on her cheek. The air possesses a sharper tang, does it not? The breezes carry whispers of frost. She continued, sketching a vivid tableau with her words, the maples ablaze in scarlet and gold, the loamy fragrance of moist earth, the frantic bustle of squirrels hoarding provisions. Her voice, typically calm and even, now danced with a melodic quality imbued with the enchantment of autumn's transformation. Winter approaches, she concluded, her tone softening to a near whisper. A season of inward reflection, of tales shared by the fire's glow, and of cherishing the refuge of hearth and home. A near-silent sigh escaped her. Winter also represented a time of seclusion, a battle against the biting cold and the creeping tendrils of loneliness that sometimes ensnared her spirit. The lesson concluded, and the children stirred, gathering their slates and primers. Amelia drank in their cheerful prattle, the sound a soothing elixir. She held each child dear, relishing the chance to mentor them, to offer them glimpses of the world, though her own vision was clouded. Miss Amelia, Samuel began, his voice tinged with hesitation. May I escort you home? Touched by his concern, Amelia smiled. That's kind, Samuel, but I'll be quite all right. Run along now. Your mother will anticipate your return. He lingered, worry creasing his brow. But the wind. The wind merely shares secrets, Samuel, she reassured, patting his arm lightly. I can manage a few secrets. In truth, the wind carried a different character today, a sharper bite, a restless energy that raised goose flesh on her arms. But she wouldn't voice such anxieties. They worried enough already. Stepping from the schoolhouse, she met a blast that sent her hair whipping around her face. Securing her shawl, she gripped her cane. The path snaked through a dense wood, a familiar course traversed countless times. She depended on her cane to negotiate the uneven ground, its rhythmic tap-tap-tap a constant guide. The forest teemed with vibrant sounds, the rustle of displaced leaves, chattering squirrels in the boughs above, the distant tattoo of a woodpecker. She inhaled deeply, savoring the earthy scent of decaying foliage and damp moss. A natural symphony, an unceasing reminder of the beauty embracing her. Her pace was slow, deliberate, her senses heightened. She felt the subtle nuances of the path beneath her feet, the transition from compacted earth to loose stones. She discerned subtle shifts in the wind's melody as it coursed through the trees, each note a clue to the forest's secrets. But as she pressed on, the wind's song morphed. It rose in volume, grew persistent, its murmurs morphing into urgent appeals. The temperature plummeted palpably, and a shiver raced through her. The air hung heavy, electric. The trees began to writhe, their branches lashing like furious limbs. The wind howled through the forest, a lament that sent a shiver of dread down her spine. Leaves, once vibrant tapestries, now spiraled about her in a frenzied dance, obscuring the path. She halted, her hand clenching her cane until her knuckles ached. The wind was implacable, pressing against her, trying to unseat her balance. She felt the sting of icy rain against her cheek, a foretaste of the onslaught brewing. Panic began to swell within, a frigid, suffocating fear. She stood alone, exposed, and utterly defenseless against the growing tempest. She realized she needed sanctuary immediately. But which direction? The familiar markers she relied on, the unique bend of a trunk, the feel of a particular stone, were now lost in the swirling chaos. The wind played tricks, twisting sounds, making it impossible to fix her bearings. She advanced tentatively, her cane probing for purchase. The wind roared, deafening, obliterating all else. A sudden fierce pain shot through her ankle as she tripped over a concealed root. A cry escaped her lips, swallowed by the wind's fury. She crumpled to her knees, her body convulsing with cold and terror. Lost, injured, and utterly isolated as the storm converged. The whispering breeze had transformed into a raging maelstrom, and Amelia Thornton was ensnared within its unforgiving grasp. A treacherous path. The school bell, a frail, metallic chime against the tempest's roar, signaled dismissal. "All right, children," Amelia announced, her voice gaining slight prominence against the sudden lull in youthful chatter. "Wrap up warmly and take great care. Your families will be anxious with this weather." A quicksilver chorus of farewells rippled through the close space as pupils darted for their outerwear. The room, redolent with chalk and the musty scent of wool, vibrated with youthful zest. Young Thomas, tripping over untied laces in his haste, lost a mitten to the floor. Amelia stooped, her fingertips tracing the splintered boards until they met the knitted wool. "Here we are, Thomas. Wouldn't want Jack Frost nipping at your fingers, would we?" She pressed the mitten into his palm, surprised by the leathery texture of a hand so small. Soon, the children dispersed, their joyous sounds dissolving into the squall. Amelia lingered, listening to their receding voices, each a faint spark consumed by the brewing storm. She could almost feel the blizzard's push against their slight frames, urging them onward. A prickle of unease settled over her. She could only hope they'd all reach hearth and home unscathed. Finally, silence descended. Amelia sighed, the sound swallowed by the gale. Deliberately, she gathered her belongings, her fingers gliding over the smooth, seasoned wood of her walking stick. The wind clawed at the window panes, a relentless reminder of the journey confronting her. This would be no serene ramble today, it would be an outright struggle. She swathed her face in her thickest scarf, leaving only a slit for necessary breath. The wool, though itchy, was a negligible discomfort compared to the icy fangs awaiting her. Stepping into the teeth of the storm felt akin to colliding with a solid mass. Icy needles pelted her skin, and the gale clawed at her scarf. Amelia leaned into the onslaught, her walking stick marking a steady pulse on the buried ground. The familiar path felt alien, warped by the thick, white shroud. The air became a dizzying vortex of white, erasing distinctions from the already stark landscape. She depended on subtle shifts in the earth beneath her boots, the feel of the wind's direction against her cheek, and the memory of the route ingrained within her. The wind shrieked like a tormented spirit, muffling every other sound. Amelia strained to discern the murmur of the creek, normally a reliable guide, but the storm had devoured it. She plodded onward, her muscles screaming in protest. An insidious chill crept into her very marrow, a constant, gnawing presence. She faltered, her walking stick plunging into an unseen drift. For a heartbeat, she lost purchase, her heart leaping like a wild thing. Regaining her footing, she realized with a lurch of dread that something was amiss. The terrain felt wrong, the declivity too pronounced. The wind, instead of assisting her progress, buffeted her broadside. Panic, a frigid, viscous tide, began to rise. She halted, her breath sawing in her throat. She struggled to reorient herself, to summon a recollection of her precise movements, but the tempest had obliterated every marker. All was uniform, a swirling, blinding void. Tentatively, she took a step, then another, her walking stick groping ahead. Nothing felt familiar. Trees, usually comforting sentinels, now loomed as menacing figures, their limbs like grasping claws. The atmosphere thrummed with a sinister energy, a portent of ill fortune. A sickening certainty washed over Amelia, she was lost. The recognition struck her with the force of a physical blow, draining her strength and leaving her trembling. She was isolated, sightless, and adrift in the belly of the blizzard. The phrase echoed within her mind, a chilling refrain threatening to submerge all hope. She hugged herself tightly, trying to repel the cold and her escalating fear. Her clumsy fingers wrestled with her coat's closures, seeking a meager sense of reassurance. She had to think clearly, to concentrate. Panic was a death warrant. She needed to recall her training, the survival lessons she imparted to her pupils. But even as she strove for composure, a wave of despair overwhelmed her. What value were survival skills when she couldn't even see beyond her nose? How could she possibly find her way home in this whirling, white abyss? The wind's ululation intensified, mocking her terror, and Amelia felt a solitary tear freeze upon her face. Lost in the white. The gale lamented a desolate tune, each icy thrust a spectral hand guiding Amelia astray. She fought to discern a landmark, the groan of weathered lumber, a canine's distant call, anything familiar amidst the swirling, alabaster pandemonium. Only the tempest's shriek reigned, a cacophonous anthem of wintry wrath. Her frozen gloves encountered a giving surface. One more step, expecting stability, and the world vanished. A stifled gasp burst forth as she tumbled, the snow proving a treacherous guise. An instant of weightlessness, then the frigid maw of the drift consumed her. Air evacuated her lungs, replaced by a glacial invasion. She flailed, claws scraping uselessly, finding no purchase, only deepening her burial. Panic spiked, a searing flash against the creeping cold. She wrestled it down, recalling survival axioms imparted to her students, lessons now critical to her own survival. Conserve strength. Size up the peril. Defeat fear. Easier considered than achieved, she mused bleakly. She pressed upward, palms meeting compacted snow, yet her arms trembled, spent. The snow yielded, offering no resistance. She slid further, icy fragments infiltrating her collar, a chilling violation. Help! Her cry vanished on the wind, a pathetic echo lost within the storm's grand pronouncements. She tried again, projecting her voice, but the exertion robbed her breath, the snow seeming to smother the sound, stilling it before it could escape her snowy tomb. She sharpened her other senses, probing for the drift's edges. Surprisingly deep, the walls possessed a slick, pitiless quality. She envisioned herself an insect confined in glass, incapable of scaling the smooth incline. The freeze intensified, permeating her to the core, a relentless flood. Her extremities felt leaden, inert. She attempted to flex her digits to encourage circulation, but the movement was sluggish, feeble. The specter of frostbite, of losing digits, ignited a fresh jolt of dread, momentarily rousing her. Again she attempted to rise, now bracing her elbows against the drift's confines. She pressed, strained, every fiber protesting, yet the snow remained stubbornly immovable. She gained mere inches only to plummet back, the impact reverberating through her jaw. Despair began to slither in, a subtle whisper at the periphery of thought. Was this the culmination? To vanish, forgotten in the whiteness, devoured by the elements? She envisioned her students, their bright, trusting gazes. She recalled her humble home, the hearth's embrace, the comforting presence of beloved books. She envisioned the unpretentious existence she had cultivated, a life she refused to surrender. That conviction, that spark of resistance, granted her a thread of revitalized strength. She would not yield. Not yet. Shutting her eyes, she regulated her respiration, slowing, deepening, willing her body to safeguard what remained. She required a strategy. A novel approach. Crude force would fail her. She needed to be ingenious, resourceful. She extended a limb, numb fingers examining the snowdrift's icy facade. Mostly seamless, polished by the unrelenting wind. And then she detected it. A minor depression, a subtle flaw in the frozen surface. Hope flickered, a delicate ember in the gathering dark. A beginning. A whimper in the storm. The wind was a serrated blade, slashing at Amelia's ears with an unearthly shriek. Each blast threatened to peel away the meager shield of warmth she'd managed to create within her coat. She conserved her energy, centering on the small zone of relative calm around her face, fighting back panic. Then, piercing the tempest's roar, came a fragile sound, nearly devoured by the gale. She froze, breath suspended. Was it the wind playing phantom melodies? No, there it was again. A whimper. Her pulse quickened. Not the wind's trickery, but the sound of something living and vulnerable. Tentatively, she extended a gloved hand, fingers meeting the frigid face of the snowdrift. Inch by painstaking inch, she moved forward, the snow whispering under her weight. Hello, she called, her voice a fragile thread against the storm's savage tapestry. The whimper responded, a shade louder, a degree closer. It resonated from just beyond the snowdrift's curve. Amelia pressed on, hands outstretched, feeling the glacial bite leach through her gloves. She imagined the confined space as the interior of some gigantic, icebound lung. At last, her fingers encountered something yielding, unexpectedly soft. Fur. She recoiled, a nervous tremor coursing through her. An animal. But what? A threat or a victim? Easy now, she murmured, her voice unsteady. I won't hurt you. She reached again, more deliberately, her hand reaffirming the presence of thick, matted fur, clinging to the colt. She traced the contours of a head, feeling the delicate bone structure beneath, the ears flattened against the skull. A dog or part dog, she surmised. The head possessed a certain elegance that belied a wolf, yet a wildness persisted in the jaw's firm set. She followed the slope of its back, feeling the shallow rise and fall of its breath. Convulsions racked its body. The whimper resurfaced, a plaintive sound that resonated deep within her. Oh, you poor creature, she breathed, her voice thick with compassion. As her hand descended, a sudden flinch, a tightening of muscles. The dog tensed, a low growl vibrating in its chest. Amelia halted, hand hovering. It's all right, she soothed, her tone measured and reassuring. Just checking to see what's wrong. Cautiously, she resumed her exploration. Her fingers located a patch of tangled fur, stiff with dried blood. Underneath, the unmistakable prominence of bone. The dog emitted a long, tortured cry of agony. Its leg. Injured and severely so. Amelia's mind raced. The animal was hurt, lost, freezing, echoing her own plight. Abandonment was unthinkable. She couldn't simply abandon a living being to die. "Can you move?" she questioned softly, knowing words were futile. "Can you stand?" Gently, she palpated the injured limb, attempting to gauge the extent of the damage. The dog flinched again, but this time, no growl, only a sound of profound distress. Resolve surged through Amelia. She didn't know how, but she had to offer aid. The creature was too weak, too vulnerable to survive alone. And perhaps by helping it, she could find the strength to endure as well. Adjusting her position, she sought a better grip. Larger than anticipated, she judged it a wolfhound mix. The prospect of lifting its weight was daunting, but her commitment was firm. "All right, fella," she murmured, unfurling her coat to envelop the injured animal, drawing it near. The warmth radiating from its body offered a faint solace against the storm's brutality. "We're getting out of this place. Together." The dog burrowed closer, its head settling heavily onto her lap. She felt the rasp of its uneven breaths against her hand. For the first time since her stumble into the snowdrift, a flicker of hope ignited within Amelia. She wasn't utterly alone. And perhaps that companionship, however fragile, was enough. She whispered, "Shadow," and then, "Good boy, Shadow." A name crystallized from the blizzard's icy breath. Now, Amelia faced the real challenge, extracting them both from this frozen trap. Sharing warmth. The wind, a banshee's wail, clawed at Amelia's exposed skin. She burrowed deeper into the scant haven of the overturned sled, the canvas a paltry shield against the invasive cold. Shadow, a warm bulwark, pressed close, his tremors thankfully subdued. A grumble from her belly served as a stark reminder of her own ignored needs. She rummaged in her satchel, unearthing the dregs of her lunch, a rock-hard egg and a wedge of stale bread. A pittance, but their only sustenance. "Here, boy," she murmured, breaking the bread into manageable morsels. She extended her open hand, the offering vulnerable to the wind's avarice. The dog remained a stoic sentinel, his breath misting against her skin. She sensed his inner turmoil, a blend of apprehension and gnawing hunger. Suspicion lingered, clouding his gaze. "Easy," she soothed, her tone a gentle caress. "I won't hurt you, just trying to help." She edged her hand forward, the meager fare unwavering. The bread's aroma, however faint, seemed to prick his attention. A muscle twitched in his flank. An eternity seemed to pass before he tentatively advanced. His nose, black and wet, quivered, sampling the air above her palm. Amelia stilled her breath, striving to project only reassurance. He nudged her hand, a fragile gesture of trust. Then, with surprising delicacy, he plucked a piece of bread. He chewed deliberately, extracting every last crumb of flavor. Relief flooded Amelia. He was eating. She offered another and another. Each was accepted with the same guarded consideration, his eyes never straying from her face. She filled the silence with the murmur of her voice, recounting anecdotes of her day, tales of her students, anything to create a sense of normalcy. A one-sided conversation, perhaps, but comforting nonetheless. Once the bread vanished, she presented the hard-boiled egg. Cracking it open, the sulphurous fumes briefly dominated the scent of snow and pine. Her fingers, clumsy with cold, fumbled with the shell. He seemed less hesitant now, perhaps recognizing an edible scent. Another nudge, and she placed a sliver of egg in his mouth. He crunched, and a subtle wag rippled through his tail. Amelia's lips curved upward. A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. She shared the rest of the egg, alternating between feeding him and nibbling a small piece herself. The tasteless, frigid egg filled the void in her stomach and kindled a spark within her soul. As they shared their meager repast, Amelia stroked Shadow's coarse fur. Beneath it, she felt the stark outline of his spine, the sharp angles of his ribs. He was gaunt, desperately so. He needed much more. She pledged to provide it. With the last morsel gone, Shadow lowered his head onto her lap. Though still tense, the shivering had ceased. He seemed calmer, more at peace. Amelia continued to caress his fur, absorbing the warmth radiating from his frame. "We'll make it through," she croaked, emotion thickening her voice. "We'll get out of here?" The words were directed as much to herself as to the dog. He burrowed his head into her lap, a deliberate act of comfort, a silent thank you. In that instant, pressed together against the ferocity of the storm, she recognized a connection with this creature that transcended language. He was in need, as was she. Two lost souls, finding solace and resolve in their shared plight. The blizzard raged unabated, but within their meager sanctuary, a fragile seed of hope took root and began to unfurl. The road ahead remained long and arduous, Amelia knew, but she was no longer alone. Shadow was there, and that changed everything. Shadow's guidance. The gale lamented a chilling tune, each gust a brutal shove against Amelia's already frozen face. Beneath her gloved palm, Shadow's spine vibrated. The shivers racking him belied his thick coat, and she sensed her own core temperature plummeting. The lee of the downed tree offered scant comfort. "We can't linger, can we, boy?" she rasped, her words shredded by the tempest. Shadow offered a soft whine, a resonant grumble deep within. Not quite a reply, but understanding nonetheless. She lurched, fighting to rise, her muscles screaming in protest. The snow, a deceptive blanket, was far deeper than she'd gauged. Each advance a monumental effort. A frigid tendril of dread tightened its grip in her belly. Lost, snow-blinded, she was now entirely reliant on a compromised creature. A wave of despair threatened to engulf her. Then, Shadow's wet nose bumped her hand, a firm, persistent prod. He edged forward, pausing to glance back. His dark gaze, felt rather than seen, fixed on her. Another, keener whine, almost a question. You want me to come?" she breathed, barely audible. With a subtle shift, he turned further from the meager shelter, an undeniable invitation. Hesitation wrestled with a desperate yearning. Could she entrust him? He was, after all, an animal driven by primal urges. But what alternative existed? To remain was to surrender. "All right then, boy," she managed, injecting a false bravado into her tone. "Show me the way." She clutched her improvised staff, a stout branch torn from the wreckage of the tree, and trailed him. Shadow proceeded gingerly, deliberately, as if cognizant of her frailty. The drifts were treacherous pitfalls, some swallowing her to the knee, others deceptively shallow. Frequent stumbles were met with Shadow halting, nudging her leg or glove until she found her footing. The wind appeared to abate somewhat as they progressed, or perhaps she was simply succumbing to its icy tendrils. She locked onto the sound of Shadow's paws carving a path through the snow, letting it draw her forward. The air, pungent with pine and frost, bit at her lungs with each shallow breath. They moved as one, a silent, strange symbiosis of reliance. Amelia, placing her fate in Shadow's instincts. Shadow, appearing to grasp her vulnerability. He skirted hazards she would have blindly blundered into, branches lurking beneath the deceptive surface, deceptive pockets of deeper snow, treacherous slick patches. How did he discern them? It was as though he possessed sight beyond the swirling white chaos, perceiving perils she couldn't fathom. The landscape began to morph. The oppressive forest yielded, replaced by a more exposed expanse. The wind redoubled its efforts, lashing at her cheeks, yet it felt different. Less constricting, more purposeful. "Are we breaking free of the trees, Shadow?" she croaked, her voice roughened. He offered no vocal answer, but his gait quickened almost imperceptibly, his frame straining forward with renewed resolve. After what stretched into an eternity, the ground tilted downwards. Amelia registered the subtle shift in balance, the muscles in her legs straining to compensate. The wind roared in her ears, yet beneath the din, a whisper reached her. A remote, muffled resonance. "What is it, boy? What do you sense?" she asked, her pulse a frantic drum against her ribs. Shadow barked, a staccato burst almost lost to the wind's fury. He surged forward, his entire body quivering with anticipation. The sound grew in strength, in definition. It was water. The rush of a torrent, or maybe a river. "Water," she exhaled, a wave of deliverance washing over her. "We are near water. That means there is a route through." But the relief was fleeting. The ground grew ever more precarious, the decline steeper, the snow deeper. She floundered again, losing her grip on the improvised cane. It vanished into the white abyss with a muffled sound. "Shadow," she cried, her voice threaded with panic. I can't see." He nudged her hand, then took the lead, bracing against the force of the wind. He was still her guide, still leading. But now he was also her anchor, a furry, four-legged lifeline in the swirling tempest. "Thank you," she rasped, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, boy. You're my eyes now." Their descent continued, the sound of the water amplifying with each agonizing step. The air was growing colder, damper. Amelia knew they were drawing closer to the brink of something. What awaited beyond, she couldn't know. Her sole certainty rested in Shadow. He was her solitary hope. The frozen stream. The wind shrieked, a frigid assault that gnawed at Amelia's exposed skin. Each blast threatened to unseat her from Shadow's back, her sole purchase in the swirling white chaos. The mercury continued its steady descent, each inhalation a painful burn. Then Shadow froze. The abrupt stillness nearly pitched Amelia forward. She clutched at his thick coat, fingers digging in for leverage. "What is it, boy? What troubles you?" A low, rumbling whine vibrated against her thigh, a sound usually soft, almost apologetic, now laced with palpable anxiety. He shifted, his powerful frame taut and uncertain beneath her. "Shadow?" She reached out, her mittened hand meeting empty air. The snow beneath felt different too, slick, almost polished. "What lies ahead?" He edged forward, then halted again, a frustrated snort puffing from his nostrils. He clearly wasn't sure of himself. Amelia's heart constricted. She carefully dismounted, boots plunging into the drifts. Here, the air bit deeper, a penetrating chill that bypassed her layers. Arms outstretched, she swept her hands back and forth like searching antennae, seeking any indication of what lay ahead. Her fingers grazed something smooth, unyielding, and bitterly cold. Dropping to her knees, she explored the surface. Ice. Not merely a patch, but a broad, seamless expanse. A creek, she breathed, the dawning realization a chilling draft. A frozen creek. She remembered it snaking through this section of the woods during the warmer months, fed by snowmelt from the high peaks. A modest waterway easily traversed then, but now a treacherous slick hidden beneath a deceptive blanket of snow. She traced the edge, attempting to estimate its breadth. The wind stole her words as she addressed Shadow. "How far does it stretch, boy? Can we flank it?" He stood immobile, tail tucked low. He sensed the peril even if he couldn't voice it. He hadn't brought her to this precipice carelessly, he was communicating something vital. This was no simple obstacle. Amelia straightened, her legs shaky with exhaustion and dread. She sidestepped left, then again, hoping to locate a point where the waterway narrowed, where the ice appeared sturdier, safer. But the frozen surface stretched onward, an unending, gleaming plain. Despair threatened to drown her. Was this the end? Were they truly trapped? The tempest raged, the temperature relentlessly plummeted, and now an insurmountable barrier loomed. She slumped to her knees once more, the cold leaching into her bones. "I can't," she whispered, the words snatched away by the gale. "I can't do this." Shadow nudged her hand with his wet nose, a tender reminder of his presence. He whined again, the same anxious sound, yet now threaded with something else, a supplication. He was afraid too. He needed her. The awareness struck her like a physical blow. She wasn't only responsible for her own survival. This animal, this creature who had entrusted himself to her care, depended on her fortitude. She inhaled deeply, forcing focus. Panic was no ally. Despair offered no warmth. She had to strategize. She had to discover a path forward. "All right, boy," she said, her voice firmer now, though still edged with tremor. "Let's see if we can discover a more constricted passage." Rising, she placed a hand on Shadow's broad back for support. They would trace the creek's edge, inch by agonizing inch, until they discerned a place where they might cross securely. Or as securely as conditions allowed in this frozen wilderness. A voice in the blizzard. The wind howled a mournful dirge, each gust a frigid hand attempting to peel Amelia from Shadow's back. He whinnied, a high-pitched sound swallowed almost instantly by the blizzard's roar. Amelia clung to his mane, her fingers numb, her hope dwindling with the failing light. "Easy, boy," she murmured, her voice cracking. "Easy." But the words felt hollow, offering little comfort to either of them. Then, a sound. Faint, almost imperceptible against the storm's fury, it pricked at the edge of hearing. Not the wind, not the horse, something else. Silas Blackwood, a man as weathered and gnarled as the pines that clawed at the mountainside, paused, his axe suspended mid-swing. He was splitting wood for the night, the rhythmic thud a familiar counterpoint to the blizzard's symphony of chaos. But this was different. A sound carried on the wind, thin and desperate. He lowered the axe, the silence that followed amplifying the storm's raw power. He listened again, his head cocked slightly, his senses honed by years spent in the wilderness. There it was again, a cry, faint but undeniably human. Silas swore under his breath. People rarely ventured this high into the mountains, especially not in a storm like this. Trouble, he thought grimly, always came with people. He whistled, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the wind. A large, shaggy dog, the spitting image of the injured creature Amelia had rescued, bounded from the cabin, its ears perked, its eyes bright with anticipation. "Find it, Shadow," Silas commanded, pointing in the direction the sound had come from. The dog, his namesake, needed no further prompting. He plunged into the swirling white, disappearing almost instantly. Amelia felt Shadow tense beneath her, his body vibrating with a renewed anxiety. "What is it, boy?" "What do you hear?" she asked, her voice tight with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Suddenly, a new sound pierced the blizzard's roar, a dog barking, the sound growing steadily closer. Shadow whinnied again, this time a more welcoming sound, and began to move forward, his gait no longer hesitant but eager. Through the swirling snow, a figure emerged, a dark silhouette against the white canvas. The dog, identical to the one she had saved, bounded towards them, barking excitedly. Behind him, a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his face hidden beneath a fur-lined hood, trudged through the snow. "Hold there," the man's voice, rough as granite, cut through the wind. Amelia froze, fear constricting her chest. Who was this man? Was he a threat? She tightened her grip on Shadow's mane, ready to defend herself if necessary. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling despite her best efforts. The man stopped a few feet away, his gaze sweeping over them. "You're a long way from anywhere, ma'am," he said, his voice softening slightly. "And in a right nasty storm." He stepped closer, and Amelia could smell wood smoke and something else, something wild and earthy, clinging to his clothes. He reached out and Amelia flinched, instinctively pulling back. "Easy now," he said, his voice gentle. "I ain't going to hurt you." He reached out again, this time touching Shadow's flank. "Fine-looking animal you got here." Amelia relaxed slightly, reassured by his tone. "Thank you," she said. "We seem to have gotten ourselves lost." The man chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Lost is an understatement. You're about 5 miles from my cabin and another 10 from the nearest town. This storm ain't letting up anytime soon." He paused, then added, "You look familiar. Ain't you Amelia Thornton, the schoolteacher from Oakhaven?" Amelia's breath caught in her throat. "Yes," she said, surprised. "I am. Do I know you?" The man hesitated for a moment, then pulled back the fur-lined hood, revealing a face etched with the harsh lines of the mountains. His eyes, the color of slate, held a flicker of something Amelia couldn't quite place. "Silas Blackwood," he said. "My nephew Thomas was one of your students." Recognition dawned in Amelia's eyes. Silas Blackwood was a legend in Oakhaven, a recluse who lived in the mountains and rarely came to town. She had heard stories about him, tales of his skill as a trapper and his knowledge of the wilderness. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, relief washing over her. "It's good to meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances." "The pleasure's all mine, Miss Thornton," Silas said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Now, let's get you and your horse back to my cabin. It's warm and dry, and I've got a pot of stew simmering on the fire." He paused, his gaze hardening slightly. "You got mighty lucky I heard you call. If I hadn't, you wouldn't have lasted the night." Amelia shivered, not from the cold, but from the realization of how close she had come to death. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved our lives." Silas nodded, his expression unreadable. "Come on," he said, turning back towards his cabin. "Let's get moving before the storm gets any worse." He turned back to see the dog standing beside Amelia, wagging its tail expectantly. And Shadow's glad to make a friend. Shelter from the storm. Silas's movements held the grace of hard-won skill, a testament to years spent doctoring both beast and bone in the unforgiving wilderness. He assessed Shadow's leg, his calloused hands surprisingly tender as he located the fracture. A low whimper, a resonant thrum, vibrated against Amelia's palm as she knelt, keeping the dog still. "Clean break, low on the foreleg," Silas declared, his voice a resonant baritone. "He'll mend. Needs a splint." From a time-worn pouch, he drew forth strips of pliable birch bark and a roll of sturdy linen. Deftly, he cushioned the injury with cloth, then bound the bark in place. Sensing relief, Shadow remained remarkably calm, a mere shiver betraying his discomfort. Amelia stroked his head, offering wordless reassurance. "There," Silas concluded, cinching the makeshift support. "That'll serve until we can fashion something more durable. Rest is key, no running." He met Amelia's gaze. "Can you manage him?" "Yes," Amelia replied, her voice thick with gratefulness. "We'll manage." Silas nodded, his gaze sweeping the swirling tempest. "The cabin isn't far, but the trek will be arduous. Take my arm." He steered them into the heart of the squall. The wind shrieked like a tormented spirit, biting at their exposed skin. Snow formed an impenetrable curtain, robbing them of any bearing. Amelia faltered, the drifts proving treacherous. Shadow, hampered by his injury, struggled to keep pace. "Steady now," Silas encouraged, his voice a solid anchor in the storm's maelstrom. "Just a bit further." He guided Amelia with unwavering certainty, his grip firm. The terrain inclined, and the wind's intensity amplified with their ascent. At last, a shadowy form materialized from the blinding white, barely visible until it loomed before them. "Here we are," Silas announced, his words nearly swallowed by the gale. Sanctuary from the storm. The cabin was a humble refuge built of rough timber. The door hung askew and snow had piled against the walls. Silas heaved the door open, revealing a single chamber dimly illuminated by the leaden light filtering through frosted windows. The air possessed a biting chill, yet offered a welcome reprieve from the blizzard's relentless fury. Silas moved with purpose, coaxing a fire to life. He gathered dry tinder from an indoor woodpile and soon had flames dancing merrily in the hearth. They cast elongated, flickering silhouettes on the walls. As the fire gained strength, a comforting warmth began to pervade the room. Amelia nestled Shadow near the hearth, swaddling him in a thick blanket retrieved from a wooden chest. The dog emitted a soft whine, but he appeared to relax in the rising heat, his breathing evening out. Amelia sat beside him, stroking his fur, feeling the rigidity slowly dissipate from his muscles. Silas turned towards Amelia, his brow furrowed with concern. "You're chilled to the bone. Draw closer to the flames. I'll brew some tea." He occupied himself with a kettle and dried herbs, his movements honed by years of self-sufficiency. As the tea steeped, a comforting fragrance permeated the cabin, a welcome balm to the lingering cold. Amelia sipped the steaming brew, feeling its warmth radiate through her. The fire crackled contentedly, and the wind raged outside, but within the cabin's walls, a sense of serenity prevailed. "Thank you," Amelia murmured, her voice soft. "For everything." Silas nodded, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames. "You would have perished out there. These mountains brook no negligence." A sudden bark echoed through the cabin, originating from behind Amelia. Shadow, the dog she rescued, stood, his tail wagging with unrestrained joy, looking past her at Silas, a soft whine escaping his throat. Amelia turned, perplexed. She moved to steady Shadow. A gentle smile touched Silas's lips. "He recognizes me," he said quietly. "He's been gone a while now." I suspected the storm had startled him. Amelia's hand halted in midair. She swiveled back to Silas, her brow knitted in confusion. "He's your dog." Silas nodded, a spark of warmth in his eyes. "Aye, that's my Shadow. Homeward bound." The wind still howled, but its voice was losing its sharp edge, softening to a mournful sigh. Snow still fell, but the thick, blinding curtain had thinned, revealing a world painted in shades of gray and white. Silas, ever watchful, stepped out onto the small porch, his breath pluming in the frigid air. "It's easing," he announced, his voice carrying easily back into the cabin. "We can make it back to your place, Amelia, before dark." Shadow, who had been resting near the fire, lifted his head, a low whine rumbling in his chest. He tried to stand, favoring his splinted leg. Silas knelt beside him, running a gentle hand down his back. "Easy, boy. You'll be walking normally again soon enough." He looked up at Amelia. "He's eager to get moving. Knows he's going home, too?" Amelia smiled, her face still pale but her spirit visibly brighter. "Then let's not keep him waiting." Silas packed a small bag with provisions, dried meat, a flask of hot tea, and a thick blanket. He insisted Amelia wear his spare coat, a heavy, fur-lined parka that swallowed her whole but provided welcome warmth. He carefully wrapped Shadow's splinted leg with an additional layer of padding to protect it from the snow. The journey back was slow but steady. Silas led the way, breaking a path through the drifts, while Amelia, with Shadow hobbling close beside her, followed in his footsteps. The wind, though diminished, still stung her face, and the cold seeped into her bones, but the fear that had gripped her earlier was replaced by a burgeoning sense of hope. Silas's presence was a constant reassurance, his steady guidance a lifeline in the fading storm. Shadow, despite his injury, seemed determined to keep pace. He leaned against Amelia's leg for support, his warm fur a comforting presence. Every now and then he would lift his head and sniff the air, his tail giving a tentative wag. He knew where they were going, and he seemed to be urging them onward. As they walked, Silas pointed out landmarks that Amelia couldn't see but could imagine through his words. "See that stand of pines? They're always bent to the east, a sure sign of the prevailing winds. Or, that ridge over there is called Widow's Peak. Tragic story behind that one, but not for today." His stories, simple and unadorned, helped to distract her from the cold and the ache in her muscles. The landscape gradually became more familiar. Amelia recognized the subtle changes in elevation, the feel of the ground beneath her boots. Then she smelled it, the faint, comforting aroma of wood smoke, the scent of her own hearth. "We're almost there," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and anticipation. A short while later, the outline of her cabin emerged from the swirling snow, a small, welcoming beacon in the vast whiteness. Smoke curled from the chimney, a promise of warmth and shelter. Silas guided her to the door, his hand firm on her arm. He helped her up the steps and pushed open the door. The warmth of the cabin enveloped them, chasing away the lingering chill. The familiar scent of beeswax and wood polish filled the air. Amelia stood for a moment, breathing it all in, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. Shadow, with a soft sigh, collapsed onto the rug in front of the fireplace, his eyes closing in contentment. Silas busied himself stoking the fire and brewing a fresh pot of tea. Amelia sank into her favorite armchair, feeling the tension slowly drain from her body. When the tea was ready, Silas handed her a steaming mug. "Drink this," he said. "It'll warm you from the inside out." Amelia took a sip, the hot liquid soothing her throat. "Thank you, Silas," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I would have done without you." He shrugged, his gaze fixed on the fire. "Just glad I could help. And glad to have Shadow back, even if just for a little while." Amelia looked at the dog, curled up peacefully by the hearth. "He's a remarkable animal. Brave, loyal." She paused, searching for the right words. "He reminds me of you, in a way." Silas chuckled softly. "Maybe he picked up a few things from me over the years." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "You're a remarkable woman, Amelia. I admire your strength, your resilience." A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the soft snores of the dog. As the days turned into weeks, Silas continued to visit Amelia, ostensibly to check on Shadow's leg, but also, Amelia suspected, for the simple pleasure of their company. They shared stories and laughter, and a deep, abiding friendship began to blossom between them, forged in the crucible of the blizzard and cemented by their shared affection for the loyal dog who had brought them together. Shadow, meanwhile, thrived under Amelia's care. His leg healed quickly and he regained his former energy. He became Amelia's constant companion, her eyes and ears guiding her through the familiar landscape with unwavering loyalty. He was home. They both were.